Welcome back to Until Saturday live game reaction edition. And I got to say, Dave, I'm Ari
Mhm.
Wasserman, joined by Dave Ubben. I got to say, Dave, we talk a lot about games and preview shows. I don't know if we nailed a game more than we did in terms of predicting how it would go
Mhm.
and the analysis going into it of this Ohio State Penn State game. Ohio State wins the game 20-12. Um, I don't think Penn State got a third down the entire game.
0 of 13.
Defensive battle. People are calling it a dud of a game, but Ohio State wins. One team had Marvin Harrison Jr., the other team didn't, and that kind of seemed to be the difference here. What was your takeaway here?
I'd be scared if I'm both of these teams' passing games because it seems like, we'll see, you can get a full speed of Emeka Egbuka back if you're Ohio State. Penn State does not have a passing game capable of doing big things this year. They just don't. Drew Aller, we'll see kind of what he is or what he becomes. But right now, as is, and he missed a lot of easy throws today. We talked about this briefly on the show Thursday. He doesn't have a lot of great weapons. We've got some guys, but there was no difference maker there. You sort of hit on it in that one team had Marvin Harrison, the other one didn't. But even with Marvin Harrison, we didn't see a ton of special things coming out of Ohio State's passing game, and they're going to need that. I think against Michigan later in the season to be able to keep up with the Wolverines. And I came out of this impressed with both defenses and with big concerns for the balance of both offenses, because I think you can run the ball and play ball control to win this type of game. But we'll see about Michigan, but especially when you get in the playoff, you're not going to be able to do this. And I think these teams are suited to kind of play this type of game every time. But I'd be very concerned if I have national title aspirations and I'm Ohio State coming out of this.
Yeah, well, I think that the Ohio State national championship aspirations is a secondary concern in this game. I think the number one talking point here is where are you with James Franklin? And if Penn State can't do it with this team, when's Penn State going to do it? Now, obviously, I had Penn State fans in my mentions on Twitter during the game saying if they don't get it this year, then they'll get it next year. And it's like, this was the one time I thought that, well, no, I mean, like they're going to get into your preferred playoff.
Oh, yeah. The playoff.
This wouldn't matter next year. This matters now. So the fact that they aren't going to probably be one of the four teams in the college football playoff this year means they will have gone the entire four-team era without getting in. And that's not what you would expect from a program that wants to be on par with Ohio State and Michigan. I think that it's a shame because their defense is really good. I think Drew Aller didn't play very well. I don't know if you think that means he stinks or that you think that Kyle McCord stinks permanently, but there was a defensive battle and Penn State just did not have a single offensive weapon that could win at a football game, and Ohio State did. So, everybody, we had this discussion, thinks that Michigan is the national championship favorite, right? On our staff, we did mid-season national championship picks, and I believe that me and Chris Vanini are the only 2 out of 8 that didn't pick Michigan, and both of us picked Georgia. So that's where we're at right now. And you can have a bigger discussion about whether or not Ohio State or Penn State later in the season is equipped to beat Michigan. I think that's a secondary issue right now. What I want to know is when's James Franklin going to beat a top 10 team, especially on the road, and when is Penn State going to get over the hump? Because now it's another year lost. A team that seems very, very good. Now, granted, I know they could still beat Michigan and get in that way, but it wasn't a very sexy game, and Penn State seemed hopeless for 4 quarters. And that's what you get from the best team that Franklin had. Like, that, to me, is the nut of the story here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Our colleague, Max Olson, tweeted this out earlier today. In the past 5 years, no AP top 25 team, that's anyone that's playing with a little number next to their name, has gone 0 for 12 or worse on third downs in a game. Penn State's offense, I believe, finished 0 of 13, maybe 14. It got a little dicey there toward the end.
I think it was 0 of 13. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 13. I mean, that's astounding. Listen, this Ohio State defense is really good. They're not the 85 Bears. They're not Georgia 2021, even Georgia 2022. They're a very good defense that doesn't have a ton of weaknesses. But, the Ohio State fans, we talked about this on the show as well, were mad about our coaching confidential, where the coaches were kind of pointing out, hey, we don't love the secondary. Penn State didn't have the bodies to take advantage of that. But I come back to, if that's the case,
Did Penn State make a
people
single
see
play
it-
in that entire game down the field?
No.
I think that there is half of the equation of Penn State doesn't have any identifiable offensive weapons on the outside. But also, too, Ohio State was out without their best corner today, and they shut it down completely. So, like, I don't think that you can get through this call without at least shouting out Ohio State's defense for dominating a top 10 team at home. So, like, that to me, it's like really hard because people always talk to me about having Ohio State brain and being in Columbus for too long and being too critical of the team. It's like your takeaway from them beating a top 10 team at home, no matter what it looks like, can't just be they're not good enough to beat Michigan. I don't think that's the right thing. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's correct. I think that the criticism of any of this game should be on the head coach with a 10-year guaranteed contract for $100 million who can't win a big football game against an Ohio State team, if you've watched for the past 10 years, that probably isn't as good or as deeply talented as some of the teams in the past have been. So, like, that to me is the number one takeaway here. Could Ohio State beat Michigan? Absolutely. I think they could beat Michigan. If they've got a really, really good defense and Kyle McCord figures it out in a month, I don't think that this is like a Michigan wins it all, no problem. They haven't played a single team that even breathes yet. So I want to give Ohio State their flowers in the vein of people thinking that I'm too harsh on them. Who I'm not too harsh on is James Franklin, who didn't have a single receiver on the field this year that could catch a pass for more than 10 yards down the field, while the two number one receivers on Ohio State's roster were both from Pennsylvania. And being 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 recruiting wins away from actually getting over the hump that they're never going to get over now, because now we're going into the soft 12-team playoff next year. So like that, like I don't know. When I'm watching the game, it's soft.
It's not soft, but that's all right. We don't have time to get into that.
Yeah, but I just like that's my reaction to this is like, James Franklin, when are you going to do it? He's making $100 million guaranteed. And listen, they're playing Michigan at home. I know Michigan has been a problem for them. Ohio State's been a problem for them. But for how good Michigan's defense is, and seeing what we saw to Drew Aller and the receivers, there were no big plays in this game. Like, I don't have any confidence whatsoever in them beating Michigan either. So I think what we're going to get here is an undefeated Ohio State team versus an undefeated Michigan team at the end of the year. Maybe both teams will get into the playoff. Maybe both teams won't. But I don't think that it's just necessarily like Michigan's winning and Ohio State has no chance at it. No chance. Ohio State's going to have the number one defense in college football going into the week next week.
Yeah. I don't think it's a matter of no chance. I think, to me, it comes down to simply saying, okay, based on what I believe Michigan to be and the dominance that we have seen from them every single week on both sides of the ball that we have not seen from pretty much anyone else, I think it's just that if Ohio State won that game this year, it would be pretty astounding. I would be like, oh, okay.
So you're but the thing that's interesting to me about you, and in the group chat, we have an athletic national writer, beat writer group chat. Like, everybody is so certain of Michigan. Yeah. Like, there are no thoughts, but it's like, if you play UMass every week, it's easier to look good all the time.
But they have 2 games where you're going to be worried about them, Ari.
No, I know, but one of them is the one we're talking about. So like, I can't take all the information that we have from the Michigan season this year and just go, they're a juggernaut like Georgia last year that can't be beat.
I don't think it's not a situation where I think they can't be beaten or that they are just this unbeatable, God tier team. It's just that we look around in college football this year and I see a lot of average. I see a lot of flawed teams. We look at Georgia and they've looked impressive a couple games. And certainly they have the highest ceiling of anybody. I don't begrudge. I think you were one of 2 people to pick Georgia on our staff to win it all, which is very surprising. So it's
more surprising that 8 out of the 10 people who picked Michigan.
For me, the reason that I picked them, and I can't speak to everybody on our staff, but it's just that this is still, people talk about the SEC as a line of scrimmage league. It's still a line of scrimmage sport. And I think ultimately you look at Ohio, you look at the way Michigan plays. They're good enough at the skill positions, but they're built around the interior. This is the team that Jim Harbaugh fantasized about creating, that is built from the inside out. And I think that's good enough to beat Penn State. I think that's good enough to beat Ohio State again. I think ultimately it comes down to, when you talk about that matchup and what is the ceiling for Ohio State, I think this Michigan team, Ari, is better than last year's Michigan team, and this Ohio State team is worse. That's not to say they can't win, but I think for me, when I look at it, it's just that simple. Is that this Michigan team looks like they've improved a lot from last year, and this Ohio State team doesn't have the explosiveness. The defense is better, but when you get into these big time games,
them to win the
and you
national
struggle to score,
championship, though, that's not just beating Ohio State.
yeah, that's because I look
beating
around.
Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, Big Ten championship, and 2 playoff games in a row.
Yeah, that's because I look around and I say, if they ran into Florida State in the semis, I like them to win that game. If they ran into Georgia, can that Georgia offense score against Michigan's defense with a month to steal signals, especially? I don't think so. I don't think they can. I don't think they can score well enough. I think Georgia would struggle to score 20 points against this Michigan defense. And I think it comes down to that for me, that they're so good on the lines that when you're good on the offensive line, I think it's the best offensive line in the country. That makes everything look better. All your skill position guys. We were texting a little about J.J. McCarthy during the game, and it's like he doesn't have to be, Pat Mahomes.
He didn't have to last year. Yeah.
No, he had to be good enough, and Michigan, they absolutely played one of the silliest games we've seen, and that cost them a spot in the national championship. I don't think they beat that Georgia team last year. I think Stetson Bennett was special, but I think J.J. McCarthy's probably better than Carson Beck. And so that to me, I feel bad spending this much time talking about Michigan coming off of this Ohio State game, but Ohio State and what they're doing is so centered around Michigan that it's hard not to. And I am impressed with the defense, but for me, the biggest takeaway coming out of this is I didn't think either of these teams really did much impressive stuff today, and I'd be really worried if I've got Michigan ahead on the schedule.
I will say this: if somebody would have came up to me 2.5 years ago and said, "Ari, you have to bet your life that Michigan won't beat Ohio State 3 years in a row, and I'll give you $100 million if they don't," I would have taken that deal. So I'm happy that
or the next 3 years. You mean
3 years in a row? If you would have said, you have to, before I even saw the first one, if somebody said Michigan is going to beat Ohio State the next 3 years in a row, bet your life, and I'll give you. I would have taken that bet. I'm happy no one did. So the thing that I want to know, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. So we're going to get out of there because we have an entire podcast to do tonight.
Yeah.
One, what is your prevailing thought and your temperature gauge of how to feel about James Franklin and Penn State right now?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a little bit like the Michigan situation 3 years ago, in that it feels like you're wasting $100 million, and it feels like the walls are closing in. It's not impossible that they can beat Michigan, but that's the only thing that fixes this. That's the only thing that makes you feel better. And if you somehow find a way to beat Michigan and sort of flip this, it changes the conversation in a hurry. So the short answer to your question is I feel very bad about the Penn State situation moving forward. But the more complicated answer is there's one road to fixing that, and it's not beating, Air Force or whatever in the Cotton Bowl or wherever they end up going if they're 10-2 at the end of the season. So you got to beat Michigan, and if you don't beat Michigan or Ohio State with the best team that you've had in a long time, what is this? What are we doing here? What are we doing? And the Big Ten's
making
about
the
to
playoff
tougher.
next year as an 8 seed. That's what we're doing.
But all right, not to get back on the playoff thing, but if you are in the 12-team field, no one will care. It's going to be slightly better maybe than making a New Year's Six game. You got to win games in the playoff. And if they don't do that, then they don't do that.
Somebody asked you in the chat here,
mm-hmm.
What do you give Ohio State credit for? Because like Mr.
The defense was fantastic today.
Okay.
The defense was fantastic today. The offense, I'm not setting off the alarm bells because I think Penn State's defense was really good. I thought Ohio State struggled to block them as much as I thought they were going to. They looked about like what I expected. But JT Tuimoloau was unbelievable today, especially in the second half. He didn't take over in the same way that he did last year, but he was fantastic today. The defense did a great job. Penn State had no hope, and this is a Penn State offense that I think it lacks a lot of explosiveness, obviously. That's been a major talking point around this team, but they are not good enough to break this Ohio State defense, which played fantastic. There were so few busts. They did a nice job of rushing the passer. Drew Aller looked uncomfortable pretty much all day. And I think some of the weird throws that he had today, the lack of accuracy, the shaky footwork, I think some of that's because you're always looking over your shoulder. So I'll give Ohio State's defense a ton of credit there. The offense did well enough to win. And if Penn State was going to win this game, Ari, Ohio State needed to turn the ball over, and they didn't do that. So I'll give them a lot of credit for all of those things.
I've never seen, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've seen a top 10 matchup between two teams that we legitimately thought could make the playoff in late October and watched a team and felt like they had no chance to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
And I know that Penn State scored one at the end of the year in garbage, or at the end of the game in our.
Well, what about Iowa, Ari? Because they might have to make the playoff too.
All right. I think that's a good ending point here. You go watch Iowa.
I've got Bama, Tennessee on my main screen.
Yeah, Bama, Tennessee. It looks like Tennessee might go up 2 scores here, so we got some games to watch. We will
9-3.
What time are we going to be back tonight, Dave? We'll be back after.
Whenever, like basically when the prime. I don't know what the prime time games
we'll come out.
are.
We'll gauge. Utah, USC. I think is a good place to start.
Something like that. I just basically
maybe like 10 Central-ish.
Our general rule. We don't really have a time. Our general rule is when the drama for the prime time has passed. That's kind of sometimes all those games stink and we'll go early. Sometimes people forget how to kneel and we have to go late. So yeah, just basically when the drama for the night has passed, that's when we're going to go tonight. This show is off the books. Sorry, this one doesn't go in the podcast feeds. This one's just for our YouTube people. So
we're going to have to figure out how to fix the graphics at the bottom here.
Yeah, that's again. Our producer got married last week. We're still flying with no producer, so neither one of Ari or I are media engineers or audio engineers or know what we're doing. So our apologies for the graphics. But we got you here. Listen, you can see Ari's smiling face. You can see my smiling face. We're doing the best we can, folks.
We're going to kick off back soon. The podcast tonight, likely by discussing the Penn State Ohio State game again. This is a good dry run. It's happy to hear your thoughts on that. I'm going to try to refine mine here this afternoon and watch some more games, and we'll catch you guys later this evening. If you listen to our show all the time at night live, we are starting to recognize your names. The community is growing. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for giving us the time of day. And of course, enjoy the rest of your college football Saturday. We only get, a few of them every year, and it's important to enjoy them. So that's what I'm going to go do now. Dave, I know you are on your sofa there, and we'll touch base this evening. Take care. And that was a live reaction until Saturday.